Imagine your job is to wade chest deep into a pit of human waste by hand at night while everyone sleeps above you. Now imagine that was one of the better paying gigs. Welcome to history, where almost every job was trying to kill you. Today we are counting down the absolute worst jobs humans have ever been paid to do. Bring a clothespin for your nose. This is the channel where stick figures suffer so you can learn something gross. Grab a snack, maybe not a sandwich. Let's start in the cesspit. Before sewers, towns dumped their waste into pits dug beneath houses, and those pits filled up. Someone had to empty them. That someone was the gong farmer, and his entire career was buried in other people's filth. By law, he could only work at night, so the smell wouldn't ruin everyone's day. He worked in the dark, in the muck. The fumes alone could knock him out. Some gong farmers reportedly suffocated and drowned in the very pits they were cleaning. The pay was actually decent because almost nobody else would do it. Hazard pay, but the hazard was a lake of poop. Speaking of toilets, let's meet a man whose job was even closer to royalty's backside, and somehow it was an honor. Meet the groom of the stool. His job was to attend the king while the king used the toilet. Yes, that toilet. He helped clean the royal behind and managed the royal bowels. Disgusting, sure, but it came with shocking power. Because he had the king's ear in his most private moments, the groom became one of the most trusted men at court. Some grooms of the stool grew rich and influential, advising on real affairs of state, climbing the ladder one wipe at a time. So one toilet job made you powerful. The next one just made you smell like a public restroom that never closed. To make wool soft and clean, you needed ammonia. The cheapest source of ammonia available was good old human urine, so the fuller collected pee. Public urine pots sat on street corners, and people happily filled them up for the trade. Then came the fun part. The fuller climbed into a vat of stale, collected urine, and stomped the cloth with bare feet. For hours, he danced in fermented pee until the wool felt nice and clean. The irony was not lost on anyone downwind. It worked, though. Fullers kept Rome and beyond clothed for centuries, one foot-stomped, urine-soaked tunic at a time, from soaking in pee to bleeding in ponds. Our next worker used a part of their own body as live bait. Doctors once believed bleeding you cured almost everything. Their tool of choice was the humble, hungry medicinal leech. Someone had to catch those leeches. Enter the leech collector, who waded into ponds and rolled up their trousers. Their method was simple and grim. Stand still in the water and let the leeches latch onto your bare legs. Then you peeled the swollen leeches off, dropped them in a jar, and waited to slowly bleed and do it again. Collectors often grew weak from blood loss and infection. Their whole income depended on being delicious to swamp worms. If standing in a leech pond sounds rough, at least it didn't smell. Our next job could clear an entire neighborhood. Leather is great. Turning a dead animal's skin into leather, however, is one of the foulest processes ever invented. Tanners scraped flesh and hair off rotting hides, then soaked them in a soup of animal dung and urine. The dung softened the leather, and the stench was so overpowering that tanneries were banished to the edge of town. Tanners often soaked the hides by stomping them with their feet, hands stained, lungs full of fumes, all day long. Their skin discolored, their clothes reeked permanently, and townsfolk avoided them. Great boots, though. Truly excellent boots. Tanneries needed a special ingredient to soften hides, and it created a job so bleak it sounds made up. It isn't. That ingredient was dog excrement, politely called pure. And yes, there were people whose entire job was collecting it. The pure finder roamed city streets with a bucket and bare hands, scooping up every dog dropping they could find. They sold the buckets to tanneries, who used the pure to cure the leather. One person's gross was another's paycheck. Many pure finders were elderly or children with no other options. Imagine retirement being a full-time poop scoop. Death made some jobs grim. Our next worker dealt with the dead, but the part they absorbed wasn't physical at all. In parts of Britain, people feared dying with unconfessed sins, so they hired someone to eat those sins away. Literally. The sin eater was given bread and ale that had been passed over the corpse, soaking up the dead person's sins. He ate the meal, supposedly taking the sins into himself so the deceased could rest in peace. For a tiny fee, naturally, the catch was brutal. Believed to be full of other people's sins, the sin eater was shunned by the whole community. They lived on the edge of society, useful only at funerals. Imagine your job making everyone treat you like a curse. The sin eater dealt with bodies after death. Our next workers wanted those bodies too, just a lot fresher. Anatomy schools needed corpses to teach students, but the law allowed very few. Demand was high and supply was buried, so resurrectionists crept into graveyards at night, dug up freshly buried bodies, and sold them to medical schools for cash. Speed was everything. They dug down to the head end, broke the coffin, and hauled the corpse out with a rope. Families were so afraid of grave robbers they guarded fresh graves and built iron cages over their dead loved ones. Body snatching paid well and rarely got punished. The dead, after all, make very poor witnesses in any courtroom. That one was heavy, so let's lighten the mood. Our next job is gross-free and weirdly wholesome, mostly. Before alarm clocks were common, how did workers wake up on time for factory shifts? They hired a human alarm clock. The knocker-upper walked the streets at dawn with a long pole, tapping on bedroom windows to wake the workers inside. Some used soft hammers, others a pole with wire to rattle the glass. They wouldn't leave until you actually woke up. The obvious question was, who woke the knocker-upper? The answer, often, was simply someone who barely slept at all. It paid little, but at least nobody had to touch poop. Sadly, that streak is about to end in flames. The match seems harmless, but making them once involved a chemical that slowly destroyed the bodies of the workers. Match factories used white phosphorus, which is toxic. Workers, often young women, dipped matchsticks in it all day long. The fumes attacked their jawbones. The bone would rot, abscess, and even glow greenish in the dark. They called it phossy jaw. It was agonizing and often disfiguring, and untreated it could spread and kill. All for the price of a cheap match. Eventually, the match girls had enough and famously went on strike, helping push factories towards safer materials. Small win, big cost. Children didn't only suffer in the match factories. Some were sent somewhere even tighter and far, far darker. Wealthy homes had narrow, twisting chimneys that needed cleaning. Grown men couldn't fit, so masters used small children instead. These climbing boys, some as young as 5 or 6, were sent up inside the soot-choked flues with a brush. They scraped soot in pitch darkness, in shafts barely wider than their shoulders, sometimes climbing completely naked to fit. If a boy froze in fear, a master might light a small fire below him to encourage a faster climb. Hence, climbing boys. Boys got wedged, suffocated on soot, or fell. Their knees and spines grew twisted from years of constant climbing. The soot caused a brutal disease in many of them, one of the very first cancers ever linked to a single job. They worked for years for a master who barely fed them, so that rich families could enjoy a tidy, cozy fireplace. It took decades of reformers and far too many dead children before the law finally banned sending kids up chimneys, from cramped chimneys to crawling cellars. Before pest control, cities swarmed with rats, and someone had to catch them by hand. The rat catcher hunted vermin in cellars and sewers, snatching live rats with their bare fingers, day after day. Bites were constant, and the wounds often turned septic. Handling diseased rats was a fast track to fevers and infection. Some became celebrated experts. One famous catcher even worked for the queen and bred the prettiest rats to sell as pets. Others sold their catch to gambling dens, where dogs killed rats for sport. Either way, the catcher always went home bitten. If catching rats sounds desperate, the next job was reserved for the poorest of the poor, often barefoot little children. Mudlarks waded into the freezing river mud at low tide, scavenging whatever the city's filth had left behind. They hunted for coal, rope, bones, and scraps of copper, anything they could sell for a few desperate pennies. The mud was raw sewage and broken glass. They cut their feet, froze in the cold, and waded back in anyway. It barely kept them alive, but it was honest work in a city that offered them nothing else at all. We've saved a true nightmare for last. When plague swept through a city, someone had to handle the endless dead. During outbreaks, towns hired searchers of the dead to enter infected homes and identify what had killed each person. They were usually poor old women, sent into plague houses with little protection, surrounded by the sick and dying. Then the corpse collectors arrived with carts, piling up bodies to haul away to mass graves outside the city walls. They worked surrounded by infection, and many caught the plague themselves. Job security was high, life expectancy was not. So that was history's worst jobs. Cesspits, pea vats, leech ponds, rotting jaws, and carts full of the dead. The next time your job feels soul-crushing, Remember, nobody is asking you to stomp barefoot in a vat of strangers' urine. And remember our gong farmer, chest deep in the pit at midnight, doing the one job nobody else on earth wanted. He suffered so you could scroll comfortably on a clean, sweet-smelling couch. History really was disgusting and weirdly fascinating. If this made you grateful for indoor plumbing, hit subscribe so more stick figures can suffer for your education. And tell us below, which of these jobs would you least want to do? Be honest, we already know it's the cesspit.